My talk is about making decisions. I'll try to make it very, very practical. So if I get too high level, just boo me off the stage. So the time I've been in the Agile movement, in my experience, what it's all about is this hummingbird. Not this one in particular, but companies want to be like this hummingbird because it's nimble and, dare I say, agile. And it's able to change direction in an instant. So once companies get bigger, they look more like this airplane, which has lots of force. It's beautifully engineered, but it's really difficult and slow to maneuver. So what companies eventually do is they hire an expensive consultant to tell them how to become a hummingbird. And in some cases, this expensive consultant was me. But in my experience, all they wanted me to do is what Kevin talked about this morning, is to help them do Agile instead of be Agile, which became really frustrating to me. So it seemed to me like they asked me to paint their beautifully engineered airplane into the colors of a hummingbird, believing that it would make them a hummingbird. What makes much more sense to me, let's see if I have better luck with my video, is to break down the organization into lots of little birds that make autonomous decisions, but in concert with each other. So this is what we tried to do at Genie, where I'm working now. So about 4 years ago, I stopped being a consulting airplane painter and started becoming a bird farmer. Trying to teach people how to act like these birds by making decisions on their own, but still acting in concert with each other. So, the 5 points I want to get across today is a little bit of context. What's the assumptions that we have that underpin how we operate? Which mechanisms do we avoid? Which I think are also just as important as the ones that we do use. Then we spend the majority of our time on the practices that we do use. And then I'm going to talk quickly about speed. And I'll try to break it down in the end to 2 principles that you hopefully easily remember and bring back to your organization and be able to apply there to decide how you want to decide. All right, let's get started. So what we assume at Genie, where I work, is that the people that we hire are self-motivated, trustworthy individuals. So we assume we don't need to control them all the time. If we create an environment where they can flourish, they're intrinsically motivated to do so because they want to achieve something because that will make them fulfilled. And a little bit more about intrinsic motivation. We assume there's 4 main components that motivates people, being autonomy, mastery, purpose, which you might have heard from the very popular book by Dan Pink. And we added a 4th one, which is belonging. Quickly go through them. So autonomy means I have freedom, at least to some degree, how I work, what I work on, who I'm working with, and when I work. Mastery is about I get better at what I do. I can see progress. I can see the person I want to be in a few years' time. I'm making progress towards that person. And purpose is about that there is something, we're working together on something that is a cause, not just something that we earn money with, but something I believe in that will make the world a better place, just in a little bit. But it better does, because otherwise I won't be very much motivated. Oh, I just figured out if I make a step forward, I won't look into this slide all the time. Awesome, totally different experience. And the 4th one is belonging, which means when I go to work, there's not just co-workers or colleagues waiting there for me that I only care about because they work on the same stuff as I do, but I care about them as human beings. And vice versa, they care about me, and that adds a whole another level of motivation to the whole game. And the 3rd one I want to mention is Beta Codex, which doesn't get very much love in the Agile community. So I want to promote it because that's a model that we use, that we find it super helpful. And it's basically assuming there is autonomous teams that can make autonomous decisions and they're steered by the market. So we leave most of the steering of the company to the market. It's not like we ask the market, what do you want? And we do exactly that, but you know how it works with customer-centric blah. You probe the market and you see what they do, and then you make your decisions based on that. So here are the things that we're avoiding. The first and foremost is pretty abstract. Don't boo just yet. I'll get more concrete in a minute. The first one is coercion. So coercion means I tell someone what to do, and they have to because I outrank them, even though they don't want to. We heard this morning from Christopher. What you can get in best case out of this, in my experience, is obligation. People do it because they think they have to, so they don't lose their job or whatever. But you won't get the 100% responsibility and their best energy out of this. So we try to avoid this. The next one is majority vote. So if you want to make a decision, one way to do it is I'll ask you, all right, here's option A, who's in favor of option A? Everyone raises their hand. Who's in favor of option B? Everyone who's for option B raises their hand, and we count the hands, and the most hands win. What this leads to is we divide ourselves in camps of winners and losers, and it eventually leads to us versus them mentality, which we try to avoid because it's psychologically not very helpful. The best example I know for this is the US election, because they have these two big parties and they're almost 50% split, and every 4 years half the population gets to feel like losers, and that's great. And then 4 years later you hope that you're going to be on the winning side. The next thing we try to avoid is consensus. Consensus means everyone's for a decision. What this usually leads to is, sometimes leads to deadlocks because we can't find an option that we all agree on. And if we do, it's often very watered down because it's only the parts that all of us like. I'll get to in a minute what we do instead. But the fourth one that I want to mention is representatives. And the reason why we try to avoid this is because as a representative, you're representing a group, and you usually convene with them what they think about certain options, and then you go into a meeting. And if the meeting is well done, there's going to be new options that are going to emerge that entirely haven't been thought about before. And then this representative thinks, all right, well, this hasn't come up when I convened with my group. I wonder what they think about. Do I have really the mandate to decide now without asking them again? So what often happens is, well, I'm not sure. I have to reconvene with my group. Let's then meet again later, and we do it then. It doesn't really create a lot of momentum in that space, and it often mentally prevents people from coming up with completely new ideas because they already know then, well, I have to go back to my group and discuss them. Okay, so here are the things that we do. A helpful model, or a model that we have found helpful, is the 7 levels of delegation out of Management 3.0. I'm quickly going to run you through it without any detail. Is the first one is tell. I decide, I'm going to tell you what to do, and I just want you to do it, no questions asked. This is the end of the discussion. 2 is sell. I'm still going to decide, but I'm going to explain it to you so you can understand the reasoning behind my decision, and hopefully that will lead to a little more buy-in from your part and a little more acting out of responsibility rather than obligation. And the third one is then consult. Instead of me deciding and then telling you, I'm going to ask you first about your opinion. And once I heard all that, I'm going to make the decision, and then that's it. And then number 4, we're going to meet in the middle, literally at a table, and we talk about it, and we're going to try to decide together. And then the bottom is basically mirrored the above from your or switching the decision part to you. So advise is about, you're going to decide, but I want you to ask me first. Inquire is, you can decide, but when I ask you about why you made this decision, I want you to explain it to me, to sell it to me. And 7, delegate is the same as tell. You just decide, I never want to hear about it again, just get it done. Now, we actually don't use the bottom half because it's just a mirror from the top, from a different perspective. And we said we don't want tell. This is not good enough for us. This is squarely in the coercion camp that we're trying to avoid. So next I'm gonna go through the 4 mechanisms that we use that fit nicely into the rest, shall say, of this model. And the first one is, when I want to make a decision, the first thing I think about, is it safe to fail? And there's 2 components to that. The first one is it reversible? And the second one is, how high is the consequence of this decision? I'll give you an example. Reversible. If I want to hang up a graphic on the wall in the office because I think this is a great model and I'm going to hang it up, which actually happened. And I'm not going to ask anyone before I do this because it's super easily reversible. If someone complains and says this is bullshit, I can just go there and take it off again. But then we can have a discussion why this person thinks it's bullshit and I think it's great. So it's reversible decisions are great for experimenting. You can gather evidence and then talk about what you learned in the experience. And the second part is consequence. So if it's really low consequence, again, I don't ask anyone. When I ordered this adapter for my laptop, I didn't go around the company and try to figure out who has a high stake in hardware, because this thing costs 50 euros. It would be much more expensive me spending my time and someone else's time to figure out if it's good to buy this adapter or another one, or find a cheaper reseller or whatever. But again, low consequence decisions are great for learning. Now, someone might walk up to me and say, why did you order your this adapter at the beep store and not at this other store where you can get it cheaper? Oh, well, I didn't know. But now, when I order a big laptop next time, I'll make sure I check with you because you seem to have a stake in this. So those are 2 things about safe to fail action. Now, if this doesn't apply because it's not easily reversible and it has high consequence, I think next about, do I have the mandate to make this decision on my own? And mandates for us are tied to roles. So people at Genie fulfill certain roles, and there's mandates attached. Now, the thing is, we actually don't have these very explicit. We haven't written down on paper what each role incurs in terms of mandates, but they're very implicit. The beauty about this is that the mandate for a backend developer in one team might actually be a different one than in another team. And it's this constant renegotiation of what is my mandate, what do you expect of me, and what I'm willing to take responsibility for, and what not. So that's the second part. Example, Agile by example. So we take a recruiter. Recruiters, for us, do the initial screening of a candidate. That's a 45-minute video call, and after that call, they decide if this person goes on into the rest of the application process, and it's their decision. We don't want them to consult other people with that. If they're unsure, of course, they can do that if they need help, but we want them to make the decision themselves so it's quick. And they are the experts in the field anyway. So if that doesn't apply, then the next step will be to jump to number 4, agree. So maybe there is a group that has the mandate to decide this, and we'll try to do a group consent process with them. Now, we pretty much, one by one, copied this from Sociocracy, so I'll just point you there. I'm not going to go into the details. Just want to point out one thing where you can really mess it up. And to that, I quickly explain how the voting process happens in the end. And that is, there's 3 ways to vote. I'm going to make a proposal, and then we're going to have a vote in terms of consent process here. And everyone who's going to be for this proposal going to show me a thumbs up. So this is my preferred option. I want us to do this. The second option, that how you can vote, is you're going to put your thumbs to the side, which means this is not my preferred option, but I can live with this. If the group thinks we should do this, I can commit to this, and I'm going to try to honor this commitment that we just came out with. And the third one is thumbs down, which means I have a reasoned objection. And this is where most people screw it up, because they think about what they know from other voting processes is, oh, thumbs down means a veto. That just means discussion is over, I'm against it, nothing you can do about it. No, reasoned objection is actually the start of a discussion. And a reasoned objection is always geared towards a goal. And the reason objection is me explaining, I think I see something that you don't seem to see that will prevent us reach that goal or harm us as an organization, maybe our culture or something else. So I see something that will harm us or prevent us from reaching our goal. This is what a reason objection is about. Reason objection is not good enough just saying, I don't like this option. Well, congratulations. Can you come up with more reasoning for that? Because otherwise, this is not a valid statement in a consent process. So, needless to say, it helps to have a facilitator for very heated discussions if you want to solve them with a consent process. But that actually works surprisingly well if you get a little bit of experience in it. Now, they usually don't work in a big setting like this. So we use them in our small teams, which are usually up to 10 people, not more. In there it works well. Now, we could still do it in a small group and not get to a decision, and then we would escalate to the next step, which is the advice process. Or, second scenario is that there is no one group, a small enough group that could decide this, so it goes to the advice process right away. The advice process is actually very similar to the consent process in terms of what you try to reach. You try to reach consent within a group, but instead of gathering all people together at the same time in the same room, you just give the decision to one person, and the task for this person is to reach consent within this group. And usually, or the way we do it is, we start it on the wiki. We send out an email to everyone saying, I just started this advice process. And if you want to give input, please let me know, or just comment on the wiki, and I'll approach you if I want to clarify questions. And then in the end, it's my task to make the best decision for the group. Now this is hard to grasp at the beginning, but this actually works surprisingly well. If in your company, in your organization, you have a culture of trust, or it's not even only about culture, it's about between individuals. If you want to make a decision and I trust you and I have confidence that you are trying to make the best decision for the company, then this will work, because you can make a decision even if I'm against it. Let's say you come to me and you say, Manuel, here's 3 options, A, B, and C. And I say, well, option A sounds okay. I really like option B for these reasons. And option C, we should not do. This is horrible. Here's the goal that we're trying to reach. It's going to prevent us from reaching that. And then you talk to a bunch of other people and you come to the conclusion, actually the best thing for the organization would be to go with option C. Now you come back to me and you say, look, Manuel, I heard you want option B for these reasons, but I also talked to other people and they really think we should do option C for these reasons. And I heard that you don't want to do option C for these other reasons, but for me, this actually outweighs the reasons you gave me. Is that plausible? And if we have this trusting relationship, then I can go with this, as long as you make me heard and understood. Okay. Now, here's a hard fact that I don't have any backup for. So no, these are not hard facts. These are my assumptions, what the distribution is in terms of mechanisms that we use. So really, it's about 90% in people decide themselves because it's either safe to fail or they have the mandate to make the decision. About 10 times less of the decisions happen within groups with the consent process. And again, 10 times less of decisions happen with the advice process. So I did a little count before I came here. And in the last 6 months, we did 22 advice process decisions within the company, which is about 1 a week. Well, I looked through them and actually said, well, 4 of these should have been consent processes within another group, but here we are. So that will also happen, and that's actually also something you need to tally out amongst each other. Okay, quick word about speed. everyone I talk to about this, and also people at Genie will say, well, this is all nice and well, but it really takes a long time. It steals momentum from what I'm trying to get done. And it's really hard, to hear all these people, understand all their reasoning, and then finally come to a decision. So I want to quickly compare sell to consult. So let's say you wish for a mandate to just decide this on your own, but you don't, so you have to consult people with the advice process. But I want you to quickly zoom out and think about what's the goal of decision making. The goal of making a decision is not having a decision made. The goal of decision making is to effect some sort of change. You want something to happen, and usually that includes people changing their behavior in some way. And my personal theory is, if I just decide on my own and then try to convince you afterwards that this is a good idea, the behavior change will actually take a lot longer compared to if I included you in the decision making up front and you already agree. There's no convincing to do. All the convincing is done. Now we have a decision, and everyone just needs to get their act together, take 100% responsibility, and then just make it happen. And that's a lot faster, in my experience, and makes logical sense to me. I hope it does to you as well. And another aspect to this actually is that hopefully by including a more diverse points of views in the decision-making process, you will actually end up with a better decision as well. But that's on top of the speed discussion. Okay, so I want to break it down to 2 principles that are hopefully really easy to remember, and that will help you figure out how to make decisions and also who should make the decision, or most and foremost, who. So principle number 1 is people who have to carry out a decision make the decision. So there's no more of, I'm going to decide this and you're going to do it. Well, if you don't want to be in the doing camp, then I'm not sure if you should actually be part of the decision-making process. We want to move decision to where the information is, where people are that actually know hands-on what this entails. And the second principle is people who are impacted by a decision can give input to it. So that's basically the advice process part, where you may ask people that are experts in the field or are affected by a decision. And I want to stress one thing about this, and that's the can word. Doesn't mean everyone has to. What we actually did in the beginning at Genie, well, we haven't had these 4 steps, but also people thought everyone had to give input to every advice process. So every time someone sent an email around to everyone, I was like, oh no, not another one. I have to think about this problem. But no, you don't. It's safe to say, I don't have a strong opinion on this matter. I trust that other people will take care of this. It's not that this issue isn't important, but I don't have to be part of the decision-making process. So it's a lot about personal time management skills. Again, taking responsibility for your own time. Okay, one last thing. So with so many things, this distributed decision-making is simple. You can break it down to these 2 principles and 4 practices, but it's not easy. Because it's not only about copying exactly the mechanisms that we use. It's about things like empathy, understanding others, understanding your own needs, being able to communicate them, nonviolent communication, giving tough feedback on stuff you don't like, conflict resolution when you don't agree, mediation when you need someone else to help you communicate in a way to understand the other person because you can't do it on your own, leadership, responsibility, we heard today already a lot, accountability, and personal time management, as I already just mentioned. So if you're only going to do the things on the left, you can do that. I think it will already be helpful, but that will be the part where you paint your airplane to look like a hummingbird. To become the hummingbird, you'll also have to invest in the things on the right. So with that, I'll thank you. And I know I only scratched the surface of decision making, and I could talk hours about this stuff, especially on the things on the right. So I'm gonna be around for the remainder of the conference. So if you see me walking around and looking lost, please come up to me and talk to me. No, really do. It helps me out. Please. If I'm sounding desperate, that's what it is. And two things I want to point out. Well, first of all, we're hiring, so if you want to work in an environment in beautiful Munich that is like that, click on that. But more importantly, we've got a handbook that gives a high-level overview of how we work. So if you follow this link, you get there. And on our blog, you'll also find a 10-minute read blog post about decision making that goes into more detail. Thank you very much.
This sounds really great. How do you think this will scale as the company continues to grow, this process?
Of course, the scaling question.
Of course, the scaling. You knew that it was going to come.
Yeah, that's why I'm prepared. So I actually think the advice process, number of advice processes, doesn't necessarily get much bigger because you still have the same amount of decisions that you need to have on a global level. Gonna grow a little, but not linearly. And I think it's just a matter of breaking down the organization in more and more autonomous bits and pieces, where you don't have to have these global decisions all the time. But that's a whole other talk by itself. The way I think it works, it's actually very fractal. So I think teams scale up to 10 people to have being effective with this decision-making process. I think the way we're right now, we have these autonomous teams around a center, and I think this will scale up to 10 teams around this one center, and then we'll split again organically into 2 centers, and we have to think about, well, what are the least amount of dependencies that we have, so we are able to split, and then we'll just have to decide on, all right, what are they autonomous about, and what are apart from us. I think that's how it's going to scale, but only time will tell, hopefully.
How did you, maybe not decide, but say that someone can make decision or not? Because you said it can be different for different teams.
Yeah. Well, I like the approach of ask for forgiveness rather than allowance or whatever it says, or permission. So try it out, see if people get angry about it. But if you're unsure, just ask. I mean, it's a negotiation. There is no clear-cut line of this is exactly what you're allowed to decide. And we specifically, explicitly try to avoid this, because then we have to come up with a really long list of very explicit things you're allowed to decide. But only, it's going to have lots of if cases and blah, blah, blah. No, we want it to be very on a guidelines level. This is what you can decide, and then for new people that takes some getting used to. Really, getting in there. Like, can I really just every single person that joins? So we have a learning budget, 2,500 and 5 days each year. You can just do whatever, and usually people when they start they go like, so I found this course that I really like. Can I just book that? Yeah. So who should ask? You don't ask anyone. You just book it. And so it's literally teaching people again to take responsibility for their own action. It's okay if you book the 5-day yoga course on Mallorca, that's cool, but it's all going to be transparent, so people are going to inquire, can you explain to me why you made this decision? And if you have a good reasoning, that's cool.